When I think about my wife, for example, there's like, she will sometimes like we moved here to Colorado and we've loved it. And I remember like when we were in Georgia before, one day my wife was like, yeah, we should move to Colorado. I was like, what? Colorado? Because we were starting to like explore other cities that we were interested in. But like, I guess the long and short of it is like, I feel like my wife has this, an INTJ, she has this ability to like, she'll just casually mention something and it's like, it feels like it's completely out of the blue. And I'm just like, where in the world did you come up with that? Like, we were just not talking at all, or we're talking about something else. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I think we should move to Colorado, or I think you should grow your hair out, Nii. What? Like, where did that come from? And I'm like, I don't know. And then I'll kind of ask her questions, and then I'll just listen to her advice. And it turns out to be really good advice. So I feel like sometimes, like when my wife, the lesson is like when my wife casually mentions something, I'm like, I should probably pay close attention. It's almost like she'll have these really deep insights, but she'll present them in such a nonchalant way that if I'm not really paying attention, I'll just like dismiss it or like, oh yeah, whatever. And then end up missing something really, really important. So I feel like that's something I've noticed. I feel like for ENTJs and extroverts, if there's something that's really important, we have a tendency to want to be emphatic and we want to gesture and we want to make it really clear. And so like how we say it and what we say tends to match. But I can feel like sometimes with INTJs, they'll say really profound things, but the delivery is so casual or nonchalant that it can almost be easy for me to miss it because I'm like, it's not being presented in a way that's like screaming at me like, hey, you should really pay attention to this idea. It's important. And so I don't know if that's something you guys have noticed or experienced or observed, but that was like the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like the extrovert, when they get excited about an idea or about something, they're more likely to gesture or show it externally. And so it's going to be more obvious. Whereas the introverts, when they have an insight, they may not always express it as emphatically as how it would show up in an extrovert. But it's almost like the introvert's been thinking about it for 10,000 years, that when they do say it, there's a lot of weight to it and a lot of insight and a lot of depth. It may be deceiving how they're presenting the package. With Personality Hacker, I listened to one of their podcasts, and they talked about how NI DOMs, they're all steak but no sizzle. So it's like they'll give you the steak, so what they say has a lot of meat to it, but it won't always have that extroverted sensing sizzle to it. So it won't have that pizzazz, but it still has like so much meat. And I'm like, wow, it's a really great representation of that INTJ, ENTJ dynamic you just mentioned about how the INTJ will say something so chilly, but it's so filled with substance that you can almost miss it if you're not paying enough attention and trying to dissect what it truly means, like its essence. But if you do, it's like unlocking a new insight. I've heard it be called an impact moment. It's like if you listen to NI closely enough, it turns into this impact moment that changes your life. I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What I believe intuitives are here on the planet for is they're here to help people reconsider how they're living. And so when you lead with NI as a dominant function, it helps you. If you pay enough attention to the little wisp, like the little wisp and whisper of the NI telling you lessons subtly, it's almost like if you listen enough, it can dramatically change how you orient your life in some way, because it's an insight that will help you recalibrate how you live. And it hits you, but you have to listen closely enough to hear the sound of it. Yeah. So it's like a faint murmur. An IDOM has. Mm-hmm.
Totally resonates.
Yeah. And it's a slower, like, I was just thinking about how for INTJs, and I guess probably all introverts, it's like a little bit of a slower process of getting somewhere sometimes. And it can feel, I don't know, maybe to the extrovert a little bit less, maybe we get a little impatient with that process sometimes. At least I do.
I can relate. Or I want to know, like sometimes INTJs will just have the insight, and I want to know, I have a ton of questions about like, tell me more about how you arrived there. Tell me more. And you know, sometimes reply is, that's just the impression I get that you should go left instead of right. Why? I needed to give me some proof points, give me some examples, like tell me more about how you arrived there. And sometimes I feel like sometimes NI will get the right answer, but they won't show their work. It's just like
absolutely
kid in school and like the math kid or the math class, and the teacher is like, yeah, you got all the answers right, but how did you get there? And it's just like, well, you know, it just makes sense to me intuitively. That's how I got there. I wasn't that kind of math student by any stretch, but like that can sometimes be a little frustrating. Is like, I want to see a little bit more work, but it's so introverted and it feels very private to them that it can be a little difficult to unearth the process and all the like webs of information that led to that insight or that conclusion. And so we just got the right answer, but not always the backstory of how they arrived at that right answer.
Yeah. They'll give you their forecast for the weather. That's the metaphor, but they won't tell you how they arrived at that forecast. Like, how do you know it's going to be sunny today? They're like, I just know. I don't know how to explain to you. Always, it's a vague knowing. It's hard to know what specifically brought them there.